and to this day I do not understand why a father would take his wife and children to a prison to look at inmates. I blamed her for his death, for I had seen how her love had vanished from his life.
Who is very gender you despise were herself famous and influential author.
Pessimism is something imposed upon us by the very nature of existence itself, in every era and under any circumstance.
Surely someone this tragic wouldn't be play guitar, for instance.
To this day, I view women as mere instruments for the preservation of the species. I see in them an impulsive energy driven toward deception and seduction, creatures incapable of true thought or the exercise of logic.
Hey guys, and welcome to my brand new channel. I've always wanted to make a channel and create content, but I waste a lot of time, and the time has come. I finally begin, and with the content I'm sure that you will like and enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin and welcome our guest for today, Schopenhauer. I know some of you know him, but today we meet the man through his own words. And welcome, Schopenhauer, and how are you?
Well, I'm fine. I'm dead, but thank you for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. I know I bring you back to life to know everything about you today. Your childhood, your life, your pessimism philosophy, and take all the time you need and we will listen.
Well, I was born in Danzig, and my arrival into this world was not a happy event except for others. As for me, I never knew that moment in which a person is supposed to feel embraced, welcomed, or wanted. From the very beginning, I was a commercial project before I was a son. My father, Heinrich, a man who knew nothing in his life except profit and loss. He looked at me the way he looked at his merchandise, something to be arranged, shaped, and directed to serve his plans. He chose for me a name suitable for all of Europe, not because I was his son, but because I was part of his calculations for the future. And yet, he never came close to my heart. He never knew my fears, my questions, nor that loneliness that kept growing inside me without him ever noticing. As for my mother Johanna, she was more distant from me than my father, despite her physical closeness. A woman who shone in literary salons and melted into the noise of parties, while her son was left in a corner where no one could see him. She was not a mother who listened. She was an image displayed before others. And if she were among you today, you would see her chasing anything that made her visible, while I remained completely invisible in her life. My childhood. A large house, yes, but empty of warmth, plenty of money, yet too powerless to buy even a single moment of tenderness. And I had to learn early on that loneliness is not a passing condition, but a destiny imposed on certain souls. But, despite all that darkness, I remember one single moment of light. A solitary moment. Yet it still stands in my memory like a spot of illumination inside a closed room. 3 months. Only 3 months that I spent in the house of a friend of my father's. There, for the first time, I felt that someone looked at me not as a project, nor as a burden, but as a being worthy of being understood. Only there was a happy child. And when I returned to my own home, that light went out. They pulled me back toward a trade I did not love, a future I did not want, and a fate did not choose. They wanted to make a merchant out of me, while my mind had already begun, from an early age, to escape toward literature, philosophy, and the questions that frightened them and that they could not understand. I did not belong to my family, nor to their world. I was a stranger among them, just as I was a stranger within myself, and perhaps that is why I became a philosopher, because those who find no place for their soul create one through words. My father was often absent. He would travel for long months, roaming across Europe from north to south, not as people travel today, but as journeys were in the 19th century. A trip that would keep a father away from home for half a year or more. And with every journey he returned from, he made sure of one thing. That would go back to the School of Commerce, abandoning completely my scientific and literary inclinations. And, to my surprise, I agreed to that bargain. Perhaps because I was looking for any chance to leave the house, any space in which I would not see the coldness of affection that had flooded my childhood. I traveled with my father and my only sister, and that journey became a foundational moment in my life. Not because it set me on a path I did not want, but because through it I saw what would never have been visible within my wealthy environment and behind the walls of aristocratic society. In 2 years I visited England, France, Austria, and Italy. I encountered the real Europe, not the Europe of the aristocrats. I saw poverty for the first time, widespread misery, hardship filling the great cities. I visited the infamous French prison and heard the screams of those condemned to lifelong forced labor. I saw despair in their eyes and realized that life was not ballroom dances as my mother imagined, but something far harsher. And to this day, I do not understand why a father would take his wife and children to a prison to look at inmates. But that journey revealed to me a face of the world I had never known. The journey ended, and we returned to Hamburg, our second city after we had moved from Danzig following its fall to the Prussians, and kept my promise, entered the School of Commerce, even though the journey had only deepened my passion for science and literature and awakened within me questions that would not sleep. But only a few months later came the shock that shook my being forever. They found my father's body lying beneath the window of his room. Historians believe that he threw himself down by a suffocating psychological crisis caused by his business troubles. I was 17, and suddenly I was standing before a vast emptiness. And so began the chapters of my fractured relationship with my mother. I blamed her for his death, for I had seen how her love had vanished from his life, how she let him collapse in front of her without drawing near. I kept telling myself she had never loved him, that she had married him out of pure convention, and what confirmed that feeling within me was that she was 19 years younger than he was. That was how my world began to collapse, and how I myself began to take shape. In the darkest moments of my father's collapse, when he was unraveling psychologically in a way only those who lived with him could perceive, my mother continued her life as though nothing were happening. Parties, literary salons, evenings with artists and intellectuals, an entire world that had nothing to do with the man who was suffocating on the inside. And I could not stop myself from thinking that her neglect of him was not merely accidental, but something intentional, or, at the very least, something she accepted. That is why I accused her, and still accuse her in the depths of my soul of being an indirect cause of his death. After my father's death, I no longer saw any meaning in remaining in the world of commerce. That path was his, not mine. So I decided to abandon it completely, and to pursue what I had been hiding within myself since childhood, my passion for science and literature. I wanted to go out into the world, to understand it and seek its meaning, not to sell it merchandise. But what deepened my pain was that my mother, only a few months after my father's death, left me alone in Hamburg and traveled with my little sister to Weimar. At the moment when I needed her presence more than ever, she moved on toward her new lifelight, guiltless, as though she had abandoned what remained of her family. I found myself utterly alone, and I, by nature, was more sensitive and tender-hearted than I should have been. I understood emotions quickly, absorbed them deeply, and feelings would descend on me the way beasts pounce on their prey. Yet I was not the shy, withdrawn adolescent one might imagine. I sought to experience life itself. I rode horses, fenced with swords, fired my 2 pistols, and entered taverns and brothels out of curiosity, wanting to know this world that was not made of books alone. And despite all that, one trait never left me: doubt. I was skeptical by nature, bold in raising questions, incapable of accepting things as they were. For that reason, I did not simply mourn my father, began to search for the cause of his death, for the culprit. Even if that culprit was my own mother. My mother did not kill my father with her own hands, no, but was convinced that his death would not have occurred had he found in her love and care at the moment he stood at the edge of collapse, and so held her responsible for his departure, not because the evidence was clear, but because my heart found no explanation gentler than this accusation.
Okay, Mr. Schopenhauer, I want to ask you, how did the spectacle and bold nature of yours, together with the painful circumstances you went through, end up producing one of the most important philosophers of pessimism?
I began my journey with Latin and Greek, learning them as though I were reclaiming a language I had known long ago. And in just 2 years, I had made remarkable progress in classical literature and ancient sciences. After that, I turned to the study of medicine, thinking I would find in it a path toward understanding the human being. But I soon discovered that what truly drew me was something else, something behind the body, behind pain, behind the soul itself. So I began attending lectures in philosophy and psychology at the university. There, for the first time, I came close to modern philosophy, and I felt like a man who had suddenly found the language of his own thoughts. The deeper went, the more convinced I became that philosophy was the only path suited to my unrest and my questions. What captivated me most was the thought of Immanuel Kant. I saw him as the true father of German philosophy. I admired his boldness in questioning everything, his ability to dismantle the errors of those who came before him, and then rebuild an entire system anew. Perhaps my attraction to him also came from my own psychological constitution, for I was naturally introverted, yet at the same time bold, unafraid to provoke others with my opinions. My endless questions were born from a harsh childhood in which I never received even a trace of the warmth any child is supposed to find. And at that very time, my mother, who never embraced me as a child, was opening her literary salon in Weimar. She welcomed prominent German and foreign intellectuals and artists, among them the famous German poet Goethe himself. She wrote novels and plays, and her name began to shine in the literary world. I observed all this from afar, and understood that my gift for literature and my philosophical instinct may indeed have come from her, even though our relationship always felt more like that of two rivals than of a mother and her son. And while she was writing her plays, I was drowning in philosophy. I abandoned medicine completely, despite my professor's advice that I specialize in Kant's philosophy, since his thought was dominant across Europe at the time. I delved so deeply into Kantian philosophy that I lost myself in it. His brilliance in exposing the mistakes of his predecessors fascinated me, and my admiration for him remained until the last day of my life, even though I did not agree with him on everything.
Why? What did you not agree with?
Kant died in 1804.
And at that time you were 16, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, man, I know you. You're the gloomiest man in history. And actually, I have a fun fact. If you actually write pessimism on Google, the first thing will appear your image. Even Wikipedia couldn't find anything more fitting than your face.
Anyway, Kant represents a pivotal moment in the history of philosophy, specifically, and the history of thought in general. Philosophy before Kant is distinct from philosophy after him, precisely because he established what is known as German idealism. This German idealism influenced all subsequent intellectual movements, whether they continued its legacy, critiqued it, or even rejected it entirely. This idealist philosophy posits that our world and our experiences of it are shaped by our ideas and perceptions, those that already exist within our minds. In other words, the mind is not merely a camera that passively records its surroundings with exact precision. Rather, the mind is akin to a processor. It processes the images and sensations it receives from the world, outputting them as ideas or consciousness. This allows us to perceive the world in the specific manner determined by the mind. That is to say, we perceive the world as our mind shapes it, not necessarily as it actually exists. Imagine, for example, that you are a bat. As a bat, the world would not appear to you as colorful images. Instead, the world would resemble a digital matrix or a grid of lines and geometric shapes that appear and vanish with every screech you emit. The bat emits high-frequency screeches, inaudible to us, continuously and very rapidly. These sound waves collide with objects and bounce back to it. Every screech returns with data that paints an immediate picture of the location in its mind. It does not hear the echo merely as sound. Rather, its mind translates the echo into a three-dimensional map. The bat does not see a green tree, but rather perceives a tree model. It knows the distance to the millimeter and detects that there is a void between the branches sufficient for it to pass through. The bat constructs the world in its head using sound, not light. This is the foundation of idealist philosophy, that we do not see the world according to its absolute reality, but according to how our minds define it. This premise led Kant to divide the world into two realms. The first he called the world of appearances, phenomena, and the second he called the thing in itself, noumena.
How?
Imagine with me that the mind is a person walking down the street wearing sunglasses with yellow lenses. But there is a catch. This person can never take these glasses off. It is as if they are an actual organ of their body. Consequently, they will see everything around them as yellow, matching the tint of the lenses, even though the true color of things might be completely different. The person thus assumes that the world is fundamentally yellow. This is what Kant calls the world of appearances, phenomena, the world we see after the intervention of our mind with its yellow glasses. He named it the world of appearances to distinguish it from the world of the thing in itself. The thing in itself, noumena, in this analogy, is the true color of the world, which we can never know because we are wearing those yellow glasses. This is the backbone of Kant's philosophy. Yet, even though it resonated deeply with me, I began to critique it, felt that this discourse does not matter much to us as humans stumbling through life or chasing a fleeting moment of happiness.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we are consistently at risk of losing our very lives in a split second. I mean, it's possible we are on a plane that runs of fuel, crashes, and we all die.
Exactly. I mean, your words are intelligent and balanced, Mr. Kant. But can your theory pinpoint the reasons for my misery? The misery I have experienced from childhood until this very day? I made this question the very foundation of my philosophy. Even when I discussed theoretical matters like the laws of nature or knowledge, it was merely an attempt to answer this same question. I finished studying philosophy at the University of Berlin, which was mostly self-study, because I found academic study boring and a hindrance to free thinking, not to mention my clashes with the philosophical dignitaries of my time, first among them being Georg Hegel, of course, who would later turn into my sworn enemy. After that, I went to the University of Jena to get my doctorate, which was the first serious philosophical work L wrote in my life, titled On the Fourfold Root of the Principle of Sufficient Reason. Don't focus on the scary title. Come, let's see what matters to us in this study. What matters, in my words, are human actions, which I stated are caused by motivation or will. The will is the cause of all actions. Anything you do was preceded by a will that caused it, not necessarily your will. And this will is going to be the brick upon which I build my entire philosophy. This is a bit complex, but I will simplify it. Anyway, I received my doctorate when I was only 25, and I immediately published it in a book, expecting my ideas to smash the world. But I was shocked that no one noticed it, and no one even insulted the book. This threw me into a state of sadness and doubt.
Yeah, me too. When I publish a post on Instagram and got no views, I delete it.
Yes, but I couldn't pull the book from the market, so I went to stay with my mother in Weimar to forget my new disappointment, hoping to find her changed, and that when she saw me as a doctor with a degree and position, she would give me the attention I never saw from her all my life, neither me nor my father. But my mother opposed me again. She feared my excessive frankness, my mocking of ideas I didn't like, and my disagreements with big philosophers and intellectuals would ruin her cultural salon, which had become very famous at the time. However, she eventually agreed on the condition that I live in a separate house. I accepted the condition, and with time, I learned how to attend her salon. 6 months later, our relationship tensed up again because she was a bit wasteful, and this provoked me, even though she was spending from her share of my father's inheritance and her book sales, and it didn't matter to me that she had guaranteed me a comfortable life for the rest of mine. When I demanded she reduce her expenses, it turned into a fight, where she accused me of being a pretender and said my ideas were useless and no one would remember them, even though the patrons of her salon saw the opposite, to the point that one of her friends, the poet Christoph Wieland, happened to talk to me once and later told her, "Chance brought me together with a man of great importance. Do you know who he is? It is your son, madam. I liked him very much and he will do great work." The salon introduced me to many important people, first among them Goethe, who liked my bold ideas, and we became friends over time. But there is another person besides Goethe whose influence on me would be more important and significant, and who would leave a mark on my entire philosophy. A German Orientalist named Friedrich Müller. Müller was interested in Eastern philosophies, and he was the one who introduced me to Buddhist and Hindu philosophies. I began reading them with focus and passion, and I found in them the idea that I always felt was missing in Kant's philosophy. By the way, this is not the first time Western philosophy has been influenced by Indian philosophy, specifically the Samkhya school, which is over 2,000 years old and influenced the most important Greek philosophers like Pythagoras, Plato, and Aristotle, reaching them through trade. Even Kant's distinction, which we explained between the world of phenomena, the one with the yellow glasses, and the thing in itself, is a reformulation of Plato's idea about the world of senses and the world of forms, which the Samkhya school proposed before them in the form of the distinction between 1. The world of illusion or phenomena, which they call Maya. 2. The absolute real world, which they call Brahman. When I found out that my mother was in love with a young man who was an amateur of art and literature like her, but 15 years younger than her and only 7 years older than me, I decided then to leave home forever. No contact whatsoever occurred between us for 24 years. I traveled to the city of Dresden and lived there for 4 years in isolation, which I spent reading and meditating on philosophy and my miserable past. In Buddhist philosophy, I discovered the Sanskrit word dukkha, which means suffering or existential pain. It means misery is eternal and torment is perpetual. Humans are destined to suffer or toil because of their desires that never end, and eyes that nothing fills but dust. This specific idea left a deep mark inside me. It drove me to write a book and publish it in 1818, when I was 30 years old, presenting my philosophy from scratch based on this concept of dukkha. My book, titled The World as Will and Representation. This is the most famous, important, and violent philosophy book. Everyone knows the title, but many didn't like it. In it, I built my philosophy of no return, revealing new frontiers of pessimism that no one had reached before me.
It wasn't new. Many people talk about pessimism and encourage it, starting from the Roman philosopher Seneca.
What is new with me, Schopenhauer, is that I do not justify my pessimism with personal circumstances, like being born blind or born in an era full of wars and crises. For me, pessimism is something imposed upon us by the very nature of existence itself, in every era and under any circumstance. You know, for instance, when you are not in your right mind for reasons, well, no need to mention them here, and you start acting impulsively, randomly, and unexpectedly, as if you have no brain. That is how I see the world. I see that this world we are in resembles an anesthetized body, but has no mind to control it. There is something akin to an impulsive, unconscious spirit driving this world and those living in it, wreaking havoc on them because of its random behavior that has no calculation or rule. This spirit I named the will. Remember when I told you the story of the yellow glasses and said that I agree with Kant that the world has two natures. One we know, called phenomena, appearances, and the second we can never know, though we see its effects all the time, called the thing in itself. Well, I am telling you now, I managed to reach the thing in itself. It is the will itself. Even though it is impossible for us to see this will or hold it in our hands, it remains the primary and sole mover of our actions and everything that happens to us or in the world generally, from the slightest breeze to the explosion of stars in the sky. Have you ever reflected on the true reason you drink water? Is it because you logically deduced a need to hydrate or calculated a drop in your body's fluid levels? The answer is naturally no. You drink simply because you feel thirst. It is an instinctive, intuitive sensation that persists and grows until you satisfy it. Consider viewing everything else through this lens, even the things you intend to do or believe you intend to do. In essence, these actions may not have a strictly logical cause. It suggests that perhaps we do not fully choose them. Their true driver might be a raw will guiding us rather than our own conscious free will.
Like clicking on this video on YouTube instead of, I don't know, playing PlayStation or anything.
This blind cosmic force shapes specific physical and psychological desires within us, prompting us to strive constantly to fulfill them. And just when we feel satisfied or reach a moment of bliss, we find ourselves yearning for them all over again. To me, this will is completely blind and utterly random. It has no plan, no necessity governing it, nor can you even predict it. The will itself doesn't understand itself or why it does what it does. It has only one goal in mind, the continuation of life. Not your life or mine, but life in general. It moves, changes, and evolves regardless of the cost. It doesn't matter if this evolution is for the better, or makes you happier, or makes the world a more beautiful place. No, what matters is that it moves, even if for the worse. The will has no good or bad in its dictionary, only movement, vitality, and life. Although you cannot hold this will in your hand or imagine it as a specific form or substance, you will find it embodied in all matter around you, primarily your own body. The will establishes the world and its contents to ensure life's continuance. I call this the objectification of the will. Let's explain this through the human body. In my book, I state that teeth, the throat, and the digestive tract are embodied hunger. The reproductive system is the embodiment of the instinct to procreate. Grasping hands and hurrying feet correspond to the efforts of the will they represent. I see that you don't hunger because you have a digestive system. Rather, the will first created a desire called hunger, and to satisfy this desire it created the digestive system capable of satisfying it. Thus, life continues. You will find that every organ in your body has a specific function, or a set of functions, whose ultimate and sole goal is the continuation of life, which is the will's primary objective. But even though the goal is one, not all functions are equal to me. The instinct of procreation is what I see as, to put it bluntly, the ultimate goal of every human effort. The reproductive drive is the phenomenon where the will to life appears most strongly, because its function is not the survival of a specific individual, but the survival of the species itself. Life must remain present, moving from generation to generation, even if the human individual is destined for death. That is why I referred to the organs of generation as the focus of the will. And since the will wreaks havoc on you with its random behavior, capable of flipping your life in a single moment from happiness to sadness, and since the drive to procreate is the most significant manifestation of this will, yielding to this instinct becomes, in my eyes, the most deceptive, selfish, and misleading impulse you can follow. And the hard truth that my greatest book, The World as Will and Representation, was only accepted by the publisher originally out of respect for my mother's name and her marketability, rather than any faith in my own genius.
So we might attempt to justify your violent and contemptuous declaration regarding women going so far to describe their minds as unqualified to hold ideas or undertake great intellectual works by sharing your pessimism and your personal history with your mother. But don't you see, it is a bitter ironic paradox that strikes at your very philosophical pride that your mother, who is very gender you despise, were herself famous and influential author.
Yes, I am indeed one of the pioneers of what you term misogyny, or the school of contempt for women. To this day, I view women as mere instruments for the preservation of the species. I see in them an impulsive energy driven toward deception and seduction, creatures incapable of true thought or the exercise of logic. I know what you are going to say. You will tell me, but Mr. Schopenhauer, you yourself caused a servant girl to fall pregnant when you were young, without any logical calculation of the consequences, and you were a regular patron of brothels in your youth. I will reply to you saying, this does not refute my argument. On the contrary, it confirms the dominance of the will of which I speak, that blind force that compelled me to act at that time without reason. But more importantly, you must understand that my contempt for women is a natural consequence of my philosophy itself. I view life in itself as evil, possessing no justification, meaning, or purpose. The only way to truly be happy is never to have been born at all. And for this reason, I look upon the woman who conceives, gives birth, and raises children as the culprit. She is the one responsible for the tragedy of birth. She is the cause of the continuation of our existence and our suffering in this miserable world. Here, I flipped the table on my fellow German idealist philosophers right in the middle of the game. They believed that everything happening in the world has a necessary and rational cause, and that reason is the foundation of the world and its most paramount element. I told them, no. There is nothing but a will that cannot see past its own nose driving the world, and reason is merely a tool in the service of the will. That is why, in my view, you find yourself unable to think when you are in a tight spot or hungry. You must relieve your urge first, or silence your stomach before your mind deigns to function. And inevitably, you will get the urge again, and relieve it again, and so on ad infinitum. And that is why I see that this will which traps you in this cycle without offering any plan to break it except through death, must be an evil will. Deceptive, because every time it satisfies a physical or emotional desire for you, whether sustenance, sensual gratification, or social status, it will immediately cause you to grow weary of it and seek out something new. I expected my book, The World as Will and Representation, to make a resounding impact at the book fair, finally granting me the appreciation I awaited after long effort and isolation. But for the second time, it was met with total indifference, not even to criticize it, to the extent that I sold only 400 copies in 10 years. However, the book caught the eye of a few university professors 2 years after its publication, so they invited me to give lectures at the University of Berlin. And there, I met Hegel, the most prominent philosopher in Germany at the time, my sworn rival, and the source of my professional anguish. I despised Hegel for 2 reasons. First, because he was close to the circles of power which made me feel victimized. Second, because I rejected Hegel's rationalist philosophy, which sets up a system and a cosmic plan for the world governing our actions and historical events. I felt he deliberately wrote complex and obscure words just to sound deep and make people think he understood something. This hatred made me take a decision that was stupid and brave at the same time. I scheduled my lecture at the exact same time as Hegel's lecture. I went to the lecture full of pride that I would steal Hegel's students from him. But of course I found my hall empty, with only a few students you could count on one hand, opposite Hegel's lecture where there was no room to set foot. At that moment, I decided never to go to the university again, and I quit teaching forever. I tried to forget my failure with frequent travel, and remained in this state for years until cholera hit Berlin in 1831. I fled to Frankfurt, and there I lived the life of a monk, in every sense of the word in a room by myself. I had no friends, colleagues, or wife, just living with my little female dog, whom my neighbors nicknamed Madame Schopenhauer because of my immense love and attachment to her. Daily, for 27 years, I would wake up early, have breakfast, read the papers, go down for a walk, then go back to read, write, and play the flute.
Surely someone this tragic wouldn't be play guitar, for instance.
In this room, I authored 4 works clarifying my core ideas through more tangible examples. You might ask, did not a mind so burdened seek a voluntary end to escape its suffering? Yet the truth is, I departed this life naturally at the age of 72 due to heart failure. I was seated in my chamber, impeccably dressed in formal attire, with my faithful dog beside me, surrounded by a bust of Kant, a statue of the Buddha, and a large portrait of my friend Goethe upon the wall. In a scene that summarizes my life as I summarized it in the last chapter I wrote, "Stand now weary at the end of the road. My exhausted brow can barely bear the laurel wreath, but Ihak, look with quiet joy at what I have achieved, indifferent to what others say."
And yet, with all this pessimism, you were completely against suicide.
This is because, regardless of the misery of human existence, seeking a voluntary end does not liberate one from the dominion of the will. Rather, it is an admission of defeat before it, a confession that one deeply desired life, yet the will imposed conditions that made its fulfillment impossible. Through the individual's demise, the will remains in the world unaffected, for the cycle of existence does not cease for the sake of any single being.
So what now? We can't live happily, nor we can even commit suicide. What the solution?
My solution is that a human must, as much as possible, fight inflation with deprivation, fight want with renunciation. If something costs more than your means, cancel it from your list of needs. This is the only way, in my opinion, to liberate oneself from the tyranny of the insatiable will, or at least alleviate it.
How does this differ from the life of the poor?
The difference here is that my asceticism is based on reason, not spirituality. For example, when you smell delicious food and your stomach screams to eat it, but you know it will raise your sugar or cholesterol. Think with your mind that this sweet meal, with its scent and colors, is designed specifically to seduce you and make you a slave to the instinct that wants to be satisfied, even at the expense of your health. And this isn't just about food. It applies to everything in life. I believe we should treat the whole world merely as subjects of knowledge, things to contemplate, analyze, and understand, but refuse to let them stir any emotions or instincts of any kind within you. Do this by focusing on their negative aspects to free yourself from their seduction. Instead of thinking about the temporary relief of smoking a cigarette, think of your panting while climbing the stairs. The tedium became so profound that it compelled me to confess. Thought has wearied me to the point of despairing of life itself. The intellect that delves into the depths of existence finds only misery and illusion, tasting true solace only in silence and oblivion. This led me to focus on aesthetic contemplation, perceiving the world purely as an artistic experience. It is like entering a concert hall or gallery, seeking only to be moved and captivated by the art, without ulterior motive. When you listen to harmonious music or gaze upon a painting, you experience joy detached from self-interest. You do not ask, "What do I desire?" but rather wonder, "What is this beauty?" Your pleasure here is liberated from the bondage of the will associated with sustenance, physical instincts, or social status. I consider this the most significant moment in human life, for, as I stated, in that moment, we are delivered from the tormenting pressure of the will. But, as you have seen, while I lived truly committed to my philosophy of pessimism, I wasn't as committed to asceticism regarding life's desires, especially since I spent my whole life dreaming of appreciation and fame. I challenged Hegel just to get the appreciation I felt was stolen from me. Not to mention my hysterical fear for my life, I always booked the ground floor in any hotel so I could escape quickly in case of fire, and I carried a pistol in my final years to protect myself from any theft or assault. The appreciation I dreamed of, I didn't receive until after my death, when I transformed into one of the icons of European philosophy, specifically nihilism.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Schopenhauer, for your time, and go back and rest in peace. And thank you guys for your time, and see you later.